Please allow me to introduce myself. I'm Fred Laing, Chairman at Douglas Laing and Company in Glasgow. We're Scotch whisky distillers, blenders and bottlers, and I've been asked by our importers and good friends in Canada, Rare Drams based in Vancouver, to put together a short history of the company together with some tastings on 4 different whiskies which the British Columbia Liquor Board shops have kindly agreed to list. Initially, I should indicate that my father came out of World War II via the RAF and was offered a job with an American company who owned different brands of Scotch whisky, predominantly focused on the King of Scots. He was asked to be their man Friday to arrange some of the blending program for the Americans and to arrange thereafter the shipping and general logistics. 2 years after joining that company, my father bought them out. So he had the King of Scots brand and not so much Scotch whisky. His first task was therefore to start his own filling program. A filling program is where we still today buy the whisky at 0 hours of age, pay for it 14 or 30 days later. Of course, we cannot touch that whisky for an absolute minimum of 3 years. In our case, we tend not to touch it for a minimum of 5 or 6 years. Some of the stocks which my father laid down back in the 60s are still in cask, and we're still releasing whiskies up to 55 years of age, which is fascinating business for us. But I digress, as I often do. However, one particularly nice thing about those filling programs is that agreements struck with my father based on eye contact and the shake of a hand still exist today, despite some of the distilleries having been sold to the major players within the industry. I find that particularly nice, and it's just indicative of the way the Scotch whisky industry works still. My father largely ploughed his furrow throughout Europe, the Far East, South America, and United States and Canada, selling the King of Scots. He would blend the whisky through the course of the summer, bottle it in autumn, and take flights and boats around the world to sell King of Scots wherever there was a marketplace. He was a very commercial gentleman, known by his initials, FDL, Fred Douglas Laing, within the trade. And he spun a commercial web around me too, taking me out of school when I was 16, 17 years of age to travel with him around South America and North America to learn the ways of commerce and the university of life. In fact, as he built up sales of the King of Scots, he was focusing me very much on the commercial side of the business and the knowledge that would be necessary. So in actual fact, my first job was an old-fashioned apprenticeship. It was with White Mackay Distillers. In fact, Major Hartley White of the family was my first boss. Lovely little gentleman with a moustache, not so dissimilar to my own today. My second job was working with White Horse Distillers, again an apprenticeship which put me through different departments, but in each company the area where I was most focused was definitely the blending room. I found that a fascinating area to be involved in. Through the 70s, just after I joined the company in 1971, there was an explosion of sales for us through the Far East. A lot of my father's older stocks, such as 17 years old blend, which he put together in our King of Scots Wedgwood hexagonal decanter, was enjoying great sales for us. He spun the King of Scots into a 25-year-old blend, which we packaged into a Spode decanter, and crystal decanters and special packaging for global travel retail, and I suppose many of the domestic markets, particularly around the Pacific Rim, were of prime importance to the company. Probably on a force majeure scenario, as some of the sales fell off through the Pacific Rim, in 1999 we developed our first range of single cask, single malt bottlings. We had a superabundance of old malt stocks, and the single cask category was moving interestingly. So probably for the last 2 decades, Douglas Laing and Company have become better known as what you would refer to as being an independent bottler. We, within the company, still see ourselves very much as blenders, more recently distillers, but the blending side of our business is still very important. And you may be familiar with some of our blended malts, what in an old-fashioned style I will still call a vatted malt. Brands such as Big Pete, which carries malt whiskies only from Islay, or Scallywag, which similarly carries malt whiskies only from the Speyside region. And we have done similarly with Rock Island from the Island distilleries. We have the Galdrons from Campbelltown, Epicurean from the Lowlands. So these are all 100% malt whiskies which we have blended, which we have married together. However, beyond the blended malt category, the single casks are particularly important to us. In 2013, my daughter Cara, who had previously been brand manager, coincidentally at White & Mackay also, for the Jura brand, and also with Bowmore, she joined the company. She married Chris Leggett, who she had met at Beam Suntory. He had been in charge of European sales of Beam Suntory products. So both the third generation, and I suppose I'm perceived as the second generation, but both of the third generation were steeped, macerated in Scotch whisky. It's very much in their second nature, the same way as it courses through my own blood. They bring a lot more experience than the old guy here does. They bring a lot of very imaginative ideas to the company. And between the three of us, we bring a lot of focus, love, and attention on finding within our stocks, these stocks that my father and I built up over the last 72 years plus, finding the right cask to release at the right time into, it could be Provenance, which is one of our exclusive single cask brands. Another brand within that umbrella is Old Particular, and we are going to taste both of these brands later on. And through the course of them joining the company, we bought the Strathern distillery. We're building currently the Clutha distillery in Glasgow. And I suppose it's that youthful exuberance and acquisitive nature that is continuing to build the company strongly. That's a potted history of the company from 1948 until present. I hope some of the single casks which we go on to you will find particularly attractive. We do not chill filter these whiskies. We do not colour them, so anything that comes through from our single cask category, or indeed any of our vatted malts, is totally untainted. No colouring, no chill filtration within them. We hope that brings something rather special to you, and we'll talk about them shortly. Meantime, I'm just going to have one little snifter before I start the tasting. I look forward to meeting you in a moment again. My mother's family came from Islay, and on the appropriate occasions she was known to give my father a real mouthful. But that was largely because she had a real mouthful of a name. In the first instance, she was Morrig Sarah Ross McGibbon Hamilton before she married Mr. Laing, my father. But great Uncle Douglas McGibbon was long involved with the Scotch whisky on Islay, and it's after him that we have a sister company, Douglas McGibbon. If you ever visit the round Kirk on Bowmore, you may well see up above the church Douglas McGibbon's graveyard there, and whenever I'm over, I take a little hip flask and splash a welcome to him on the graveyard, hoping that I'm not going to get a thunderbolt of lightning down on me. This particular Clondalkin bottling is a 10-year-old Glengoyne, one of 361 bottles, which we bottled about 18 months or 2 years ago, tail ending the stock just now, and bottled again at 46% with no colouring, no chill filtration. On the nose, this is just like opening a jar of strawberry jam. A little bit of clotted cream, and it's either a little bit of burnt scone or burnt toast on the nose. Certainly very nice, cereal based and gristy. Loads of that fruit, and it's red fruit coming through as well as citrus. There's maybe an apple crumble in there. Very fruity, very rich. Little bit of pastry, some vanilla custard. Very, very attractive on the palate. Immediately some burnt caramel on the finish. More citrus, more cereal, barley, gristiness. If you've got a sweet tooth, this is a real delight of a Glengoyne Highlander, based not so far out of Glasgow where we live ourselves. I'm biased, but I find this very, very nice. Cheers. So like any and all of these 4 whiskies I'm going to taste just now, they're all available in the British Columbia liquor board shops. This particular whisky is an old particular from our Elements series. Very appropriate to be one of the elements, because this is the element of water, a big constituent of which is obviously involved in the making of Scotch malt whisky. This is a Jura, 12 years old. It's bottled at 53.7% alcohol, natural strength. That may sound a little high for you, but if you've got the right spirit with the right quality and from the right wood, it should, and I believe will, coast very naturally over the palate. So, 12-year-old Jura, but it's been finished in a PX sherry butt. Fascinating. Really interesting nose. Not dominated by the sherry, but certainly there are variations on a theme that the sherry has brought to sea air, a slight dry saltiness. But instead of any fruit coming through, which I would normally anticipate with a sherry butt, it's more vanilla toffee. Very attractive little nose, and not in the least burning. Catch a bit of sherry for sure early on the palate, but it moves on to honey. I'm a great fan of espressos, and there's a hint of espresso, maybe softened by a little bit of chocolate, sprinkling of cinnamon on top. Now a little bit drier gristiness. Certainly very nice, very enjoyable, and not in the least burning, because this whisky is not chill filtered, so all the natural oils and fats that are in the whisky just help the whisky to coast over the palate without the normal burn. I still think I could give you a whisky at 40 or 43% that would give you a little alcoholic burn on the nose or on the throat. Yes, there's I think the French call it a chauffe coeur. The warmth comes through to the chest, but very easy drinking. And definitely toffee, mocha, and a little licorice on the palate. Running to slightly oceanic, but definitely Moorish. I want another one of these very readily. Hedonistic amplification, I think they call it, when you get salted caramel demanding a little bit more attention and another refill. And hedonism is kind of the watchword for this on the finish. Very nice. It's the Jura 12-year-old element series. Water is the element, but I'm putting none in here at all. It's so nice for me, straight up. This is a bottling from our exclusive single Cask range. It's from Provenance, into which we put some of those particularly fine but younger whiskies. It's a Laing 10 years old, one of 411 bottles. This Laing cask was distilled in April 2009 and bottled a little earlier this year, bottled at 46%. It's, without any apology whatsoever, rude as that may sound, it carries no colouring and is not chill filtered. It's got a fabulously pelagic, oceanic, maritime and kind of beachy quality. There's maybe a little hint of barbecued meat there in amongst the the barley grist, but a real delight. Just takes you on a Scottish journey on the nose. That is one big, peated, subtly sweet, incredibly peated hit on the palate. It just coats the mouth. It's still there just now. Wonderful, with perhaps less barbecue flavours, but more grilled bacon, grilled pancetta. Super palate, leading to a finish. Peculiarly sweet in amongst the peat. There's maybe even some dark chocolate. Interesting gingery type spices. Very enjoyable for me. I hope if you get a chance to try it yourself, you'll enjoy it as much as me. So next up, and last but by no means least, we have a single cask of a single grain Scotch whisky from the Cameron Bridge distillery. A lot of people tell me that I really don't like grain whisky, and I fully accept that, but one of my jobs is to allow them perhaps to try a taste of it first. And when there is that explosion of sweet vanilla and crushed sugar, they suddenly change their opinion of it. But the grain whiskies do need, in our opinion, a couple of decades worth of maturation first before that general concentration of flavours is fully and abundantly made aware. It's distilled 24/7 in a coffee still, so it's almost an industrial process. It's kick-started with the use of barley, but back in the 1990s, and this cask was distilled in 1991, it was largely maize, which was the cereal which created the 24/7 distillation process. For me, it's a real pleasure to be introducing this to you, because the eagle-eyed amongst you will have spotted that it's a cask we've selected, for which I wrote the tasting notes, but being sold exclusively through the BC liquor shops. And it's a mind opener, it's a palate opener at the same time. 302 bottles came from this refill, but there's perhaps been an element of history from the sherry that has added to the intrinsic compounded sweetness that the grains at this age start to show. But it's got the archetypal toffee and vanilla backdrop. For us to be showcasing this ahead of launch in the BC liquor shops is a pleasure. You might be surprised at the strength, natural cask strength at which we're bottling this, 61.5% alcohol. However, rather like the Jura we tasted earlier, there are so many oils and fats in here that even, at least for me, at 61.5% alcohol, it is so smooth. However, I'm going to take it on the nose and enjoy it on the nose. It's gently spiced, and there's a hint of citrus in there, but it's that crushed sugar and the toffee flavour which is much more to the fore. Incredibly dulcet, very aromatic, and I would not need to rush this. I could enjoy this without actually taking my first sip over a 10-15 minute window. Don't worry, I will not keep you that length of time just on the nose, but it's one at home you could certainly take that time with, and it will open up and deliver different flavours and different accentuates at different times. It is so oily and mouth-coating, full of these same spices, yes, but tannins and maple syrup, honey. There's a Canadian corn oil style to it. The palate just runs and runs. So sweet. Catch the maple syrup. Goodness, you could pour this over your pancakes almost. And the finish, it's full of butterscotch, barley sugar. I don't think the original barley had anything to do with that, but there is a hard candy sweetness to it. And just late on in the finish, there's the gentlest of cop drop flavours coming through. Lovely spices, not as big as Fisherman's Friends. A little bit drier now, certainly warming. And at 61.5% alcohol, I genuinely don't think you need to be in the least afraid. But if you are, drop a little bit of water in it. This is the one I'm going to say goodbye to you on. I hope you've enjoyed our tastings. You're going to see them on shelf relatively soon now, and all I can say is, from Douglas Laing point of view, thank you for the business BC liquor shops are offering us. The shelf space is very much appreciated, and we never take that for granted. And we hope some of you viewing this will enjoy these great, albeit that's a biased opinion, these great whiskies. Thank you very much for sticking with me. All the best from Scotland. Cheers. Wonderful.